Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of True Story Live. This one, the first in the month of August. Gosh, this year has gone by so quick. I still remember when it was Christmas. And then, of course, we just had Christmas in July on various radio stations that do that sort of thing. I love Christmas in July because I just love Christmas. It is what it is. Don't worship my tree or do anything crazy like that. Just love celebrating the season, and so nobody wants to hear about that. So we'll get on with the broadcast. Tonight's broadcast is For the Life of Me, Part 6, What We Don't Say, and we'll dive into that in just a few minutes. But as always, want to introduce the folks that are so gracious to come one night a week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday, and help me do this broadcast, which I could not and would not do it without them. My name is Jason. I'm the host of the broadcast. If you're listening first time, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for stopping by. And also with me, I'll talk to Glenn from Australia, the writer of tonight's write-up in a series called For the Life of Me, presently. And we're excited to dive in. Glenn, take a minute to say hello to the peoples, if you would.
Good evening, good day, and we definitely here in Australia don't give a crap about Christmas in July. We don't really give much of a crap about Christmas in December.
Is it August?
It's August now, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, Australians don't give a crap about Christmas.
No, Christmas is good. Christmas, they do family and kids stuff, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Well,
But it's so hot here at Christmas time, people tend to probably head wherever there's air conditioning.
right. It's kind of like Christmas in Florida. I mean, maybe it doesn't really
Yeah.
compare, but
Yeah. Well, Brisbane's like Florida, yeah. If I was
Yeah.
where I used to live, yeah.
yeah,
Very humid.
very humid, and it just doesn't feel right without there being a little cold weather and some snow on the ground. And I'm sure people who live in Florida would argue that point, and then that's okay. They can do that. They live in Florida, so. But I've actually lived in Florida for 4 years back in the 90s. Lived in Inglewood with my grandparents for a short time, and then got my own place, and then also in Jacksonville, Florida, which is kind of like almost like the armpit of Florida in some ways. But Inglewood's very nice. A lot of retirees, snowbirds come down from the north, and they end up never leaving. When my grandpa and grandmother, when they were alive, they went there in 1976 and never left. I mean, they visited and stuff, but they lived there for quite some time. Anyway, let's hear from my amazing wife, Jen. Jen, take a minute to say hello to the peoples, please.
How to do, peoples? Good to be here. Really excited about the write-up. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button that you guys see if you are new. And we are so grateful for everybody that continues to consistently show up and hang out with us. 4 Musketeers each Sunday night at 8. Good to be here.
All right. I like that. Diving into the hit the like button thing. But last, not least, ever not least, nobody puts Marisa in the corner. Marisa, take a minute to say hello to everyone and tell everyone what happened last night that you were a part of, if you want to.
Thank you, Jason. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on another Sunday here on True Story Live. And yes, I was part of a dramatic reading of Shawshank Redemption at my friend Scully's channel, Scully's House of Thrillers. So if you didn't get to see the performance, please stop on by Scully's and check out that replay. We had a rip snorting good time. I played the part of the warden. It was lots and lots of fun. And I had the after party on my channel afterwards. That was fun too. So had a great time. Looking forward to getting hip deep in another quality Glenn write-up discussion. Going to be lots and lots of fun. I might be sharing a few links throughout the course of the stream. If you want your link shared, please let me know. If you do not, please also let us know. And with that being said, I can't wait to get started. Woo!
Yeah.
Beautiful. But before we get started, I just want to say, and I don't know if you knew this, Marisa, but Shawshank Redemption is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one of those movies, whenever it comes on, I have to watch it. It's really well done. Frank Durbant as the director of that one. He's done some other things. He did the first season of Grateful Dead, Walking Dead, and a couple other ones. He's done, I think, 2, maybe 3 Stephen King novel adaptations and movies, and Shawshank and Green Mile were 2 of them. I forget the. It might have been The Mist. I think The Mist was the 3rd one, which I thought was very good. A lot of people didn't like the ending because it was different than the book, but Stephen King liked it, so I guess all that matters sometimes. Anyway, the broadcast last night, the live performance of the Shawshank Redemption, I thought was really, really excellent. We just soaked it up. I didn't get a chance to listen to the whole thing yet, but as I was telling Marisa, I will do that. I love to listen to things like that, and they're really getting good over there at at Scully's. And
yeah, we were gonna just pop by, and we got like sucked in.
Yeah, we were just sitting there listening to it. And that's a good thing. So do yourself a favor, go over to Scully's and give it a listen to the playback. That'd be awesome. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Let's take a minute. There's only there's only one in the chat right now, but we definitely want to say hello to them. Jen.
Yes. Hold on. Phone's doing weird stuff. Eek. All right. Hello, Paradox. Good to see you. We've also got Nez in there, and I'm about to pop in there too. Hey, guys. There we go. Throwing you a bone. Yeah. Throwing me a bone. Us a bone.
Yep. Well, I'm sure more people will come in, and we'll make sure and stop and say hello to them as we can. I do know a lot of people just listen to playback. So, all right. Excited to get started for The Life of Me, Part 6, What We Don't Say. Welcome to Part 6 For the Life of Me. Last week, we spoke of the ghost we carry with us. Tonight, it's about why we communicate the way we do, why we say things we don't mean, why we choose to share some truths but maybe hold back on others, and what might be the consequences and rewards emanating from the way we use words in various circumstances. This shines a light upon tonight's song, What We Don't Say. Scott Buckley, the composer, describes this song as an intimate, introspective track featuring piano, strings, winds, and voice. The result of playing around with some new libraries and some responses to some things playing out in my life. Wonderful. The link is in the description. What we don't say can mean many things, from the unspoken to outright lies which hide the truth. Words can uplift and assist, but they can also humiliate and destroy. It is a huge and often recognized responsibility placed upon parents to choose their words wisely, as these words can influence the adult attitudes of their children. Here is the relevant conversation not discussed last week. Glenn to Jen. Quote, you fear that if you share what you really think, it will make things worse and might bust this relationship completely. But by your not speaking the truth, it is busting your relationship with yourself. Basically, I think you need to decide which relationship takes priority and get that into your head, end quote. Jen will elaborate. This could be any relationship, such as friend, family, partner, a person in the street, etc. The fundamentals are the same. It's the gain/loss equation. Think of it this way. If we lose any relationship by speaking with compassion, integrity, and truth, did we ever have a relationship in the first place? Why do we hold back? Why are people so frightened of hurting others or being hurt? Why do we tend to feel obligated for things that we have no control over? It's a bitter pill to swallow. The acceptance of what we desire is very different from the reality of life. The choice we must make is whether or not to acknowledge each person for who they really are. The decision we must make is whether we are prepared to work within that framework of understanding. What do you think of the comment above? I'm hoping many of us will have experiences and questions to share on this front. Thanks, Jen, for allowing this to be used. Moving on. Do we consider why we say things like, quote, you always overreact. You don't understand me. You are just like my last partner. You should just get over it. You always get this wrong. You are too sensitive. I refuse to discuss this. What might we have said rather than the above? When might we have said nothing? Much of the above can be from non-thinking, ignorance, wishing to hurt, etc. Now, what about the things we say to people to show we care? Things like, quote, just ask if you want something from me. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm interested in your opinion. You are important to me. You look great. I enjoy your company. I miss you. It's often said that, quote, words are cheap, end quote. Perhaps they are only cheap if the words above are just catchphrases that are not sincerely meant. Why do we say things we don't mean? Do you find it acceptable in some cases to do so? What are the possible rewards/consequences for making comments not meant? What are the possible rewards/consequences for making honest comments? Choice of words is for you to decide. We all say things at times that come back to bite us. I believe the real bite is when we make excuses, defend the indefensible. It costs nothing to admit I was wrong. And then ends with a quote. Words, so innocent and powerless as they are, as standing in a dictionary, how potent for good and evil they become in the hands of one who knows how to combine them. Nathaniel Hawthorne. All right. Want to say a quick hello to Rachel Menifee, and we'll dive into the questions. And welcome, Rachel. We're glad you guys are here. Thank you. All right. So the first part is Glenn to Jen. You fear that if you share what you really think, it will make things worse and might bust this relationship completely. But by your not speaking truth, it is busting your relationship with yourself. Basically, I think you need to decide which relationship takes priority and get that into your head, end quote. Jen will elaborate. Jen, would you like to elaborate?
Sure.
All right.
This particular comment by Glenn, Glenn, kind of blew my mind wide open, because I've been working on my relationship with myself, which has been fairly non-existent my whole life. I think I felt like to know who we are and to explore that and cultivate it, I felt like it was selfish, like selfishness. But what I've come to realize is that it's not. It's a part of our journey, getting to know other people, getting to know God, getting to know ourselves. And it's a part of healing and a part of self-love. So when he said this, the reason it blew my mind is because I have been busting myself up, being too overly concerned and stressed out about trying to hold on to relationships where I can't be myself or haven't been able to be, right, and just speak my truth wherever I'm at. And it doesn't really make a real relationship in the first place, does it?
No.
You know, like would any of you guys say that a relationship that you're in where you can't fully be yourself, is that really a relationship?
I would say no.
Yeah. So Glenn has such a gift of cutting to the quick. I think sometimes in our minds, things can get really muddy, and we're trying to, many times Glenn's done this for me, where I'm trying to get to the root of the issue, and it just seems so foggy and confusing and convoluted. And he boils it down to something very simple that your brain can latch onto.
Right.
So it's just wonderful.
Yeah, I would agree that he has that capability, and so there's all these psychologists and sociologists and people writing these long, sprawling books with big words and all these different processes that are supposed to help a person get through certain things, and then Glenn just makes it simple. Not that what he's saying is simple, but he makes it understandable for the person he's talking to, and
Yep.
it really is a gift because if the person can understand what they're dealing with in their own life, then they can do something about it. But if they're in the fog, like you said, Jen, and they don't get it, how are they ever going to be able to fix it? How they're going to
Yeah.
be able to ever make a decision to change it? I think a lot of people fall in that category of they have things happening to them in their life and they just can't sort it out. I see this as huge. I mean, obviously, I've watched Jen go through this stuff, and I've gone through it too with my own family. And I have talked many times about the last, in my opinion, the last thing that I had to really work through when it comes to being the black sheep or the scapegoat of my family, who has been made to feel in the past like I have messed up so much and I need to do penance. No one ever said to me, you need to make up for those things that you did or the things that we perceive you did that hurt the family. No, they didn't need to do that. I did that on my own. And it was Jen and Glenn who pointed this out to me, the idea that I was still trying to prove to my family that I'm not who they have thought I was. It might even be not who they perceive I thought they thought I was. I don't know, but stopping the proving, I had to do exactly what Glenn was saying, is decide which is the priority. Am I the priority to focus on my own stuff, or is it more important for me to continue to prove to these people that I know will never change their opinion of me? It just seemed to make more sense to focus on changing the opinion of myself, continue to work on that. And
That's a good way of putting it.
That has made all the difference. Thanks, babe. Marisa, what do you think about Glenn and Jen's conversation? Would you like to add anything or make any comments?
I'll wait until we get to the questions. That's okay.
No, of course. What about you, Glenn? Do you want to say anything about the quote that we're talking about?
Until I sort of came across Jen, I never realised how much this stuff can take you down. It is a merry-go-round from what I've seen with Jen and other people. Yeah. It's like you think you make progress and you move forward, but all of a sudden something triggers you and you just go down the hill.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is that actually prevents this sort of stuff getting put far enough into the background that it still exists with you, but it doesn't have that same effect each time it comes up. It's a difficult. I don't understand it because it's a very personal and individual thing. But all I see is it's very destructive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
absolutely.
Agree. So, thanks.
Thank you, Glenn. I have an example in my own life where my mother helped me with this concept. Now, in my case, it was grieving. Now, it may not always be grieving, but what Glenn's saying, I agree with completely, that sometimes you are going through something, you work on it, you think to yourself, I've tackled this. I'm done. I'm over it. And then, very much like Glenn said, something triggers you. Now, for me, it was going through my divorce. And it affected me in my opinion, longer than it should have. And my mom was still around then. And she was often a person who had wise counsel And the first thing she said when I went to her with this and said, I thought I was over this. I haven't thought about it in months. And then I hear this song on the radio, and it reminds me of the marriage, which wasn't that great, by the way. But back then, I was still hurting from it being over. And I felt like I was right back in the same place again. And the first thing she said was, you can't put a time on grieving. And it very much comes back around and until you get to the point where it quits happening. And she didn't, I said, well, how long is this going to take? And she said, I don't know how long it's going to take. It takes the time it takes. Now, this may not be exactly the same as what we're talking about as far as grief is concerned, but I wanted to highlight this idea of the trigger that happens when you think that you're over something and then it comes back around again. And I know Glenn has shared when he's seen this happen with Jen, he's like beside himself in some way, saying, just quit, just stop it. And I get that. I get, people that care about Jen see her going through this and they just think, why do you keep going through this? I'm sure that if Jen could just stop it, if she could just turn it off like a switch. Some people seem to have that ability. I do not. I have to work through things. I think most people have to work through things. If it was a switch, she would flip the switch. It would be done.
Yep.
But instead, you have to work through it. Every time it comes back up, you have to deal with it. You have to look at what you haven't gotten yet or wrapped your mind around. That's just my opinion. If it keeps coming back over and over again, it's not going to be the same as it was when it first started. It may feel that way, but these things keep revisiting you until, in my opinion, until you're done. You've looked at it from every angle and you've done something to change it. And I believe that's where Jen's at now.
And I honestly think that there's the many cycles that I've been on with this. There were things I needed to learn with each cycle.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like different parts of the puzzle needed to be put together for me to truly move on.
Yep.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen.
I have a question for Jen.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, in all of this, what's the word I'm thinking? I'm trying to think of processing, and all the attempts that you've made to reach out, can you honestly say to yourself that you have shared what you really feel and think? Or are you pulling back every time you go there?
Are you talking about with specific people or just within my own time?
Specifically related to the comment that I made when, say, you've mentioned your mum and dad, and it's a perfect example because you love your mum and dad, and you really wish, like most people do, with good people, to have a constructive relationship, parent-child relationship, friends, all of that stuff. But when you speak to them, do you hold back?
Recently I haven't. Now the true test would be if we got on a topic that normally I would diminish myself and sort of keep to myself and not speak my truth. So it's been authentic recently, but that, like I said, the true test is going to come, if something offhanded is said, or if we get on a topic, because not a lot of times, there's times where my parents will talk about things that I don't agree with. And just an example of many things that happens to me is that I don't feel like I can share my opinion of how I truly feel or what I truly think. I not that I outrightly agree with them, but I kind of nod and smile along.
Yeah.
And that too is me not being my true self, and I know there's some circumstances where it's better to just smile and nod along. But I would like the freedom to be able to share my opinions because I have a lot of them, and I'm a very curious person, and that's a part of me. Being different and unique from other people, it's a part of me. There was an example I was going to give. I have a memory of my father and I kind of getting into it because I had a different different opinion on income taxes. And this was years ago when I lived with them after I left my ex, but I just was voicing a different perspective because I had been researching some things, and he about bit my head off, and I felt shut up. I felt reprimanded like a child, and it was in front of my nephew and my mom. And it so took me off guard. But I do think there is a dynamic. I don't know if it's just with me or with the whole family, but it's like there's enmeshment there to where it gives me the message, not constantly, but just enough every once in a while, that I'm not allowed to say what I think.
Yeah.
And that's very, it's upsetting. You know, it doesn't make me feel safe or make me feel like it's a safe place to share my thoughts and experiences and stuff, because I feel like I'm going to get my head bitten off or reprimanded like I'm a child.
Yeah.
So that's just one of many examples that have just hurt this openness that I would love to have with my parents and my family.
Yeah.
So do you feel this is an issue of respect?
I do actually. I hadn't thought about that till you just said it, but now which do you mean, respect toward my parents or them respecting me?
Well, do you feel respected, and that?
No.
Do you feel
No.
disrespected, and that's the
Disrespected.
reason why you don't? Do you feel disrespected, and is that part of the rationale for you not saying what you think?
Yeah, exactly. I don't feel accepted. I don't feel respected. I think we all should be allowed to have our own thoughts. I mean, my goodness. And so, yeah.
Who's saying you're not allowed? Isn't it your decision that you don't share? It's nothing to do with them.
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually think I've been giving the power over to other people to give me permission to speak. And that's been in a lot of areas of my whole life. So the place I'm getting to is I allow myself. It's up to me. And if somebody else doesn't like it, or if they bite my head off or disagree or whatever, however they might respond, even if it's not what I'd hoped they'd respond, where they could respect my opinion, even if it differs from them, that I still speak it, and I can just easily move along, and they can be upset. It's just not my responsibility to fix. And I think that's what happens, is me getting quiet is feeling like it's my responsibility not to rock the boat. Because of the reactions I've gotten, where I have like edged into becoming whole as a person after being in abuse. So it's like things like that. And it only took a couple, like a sprinkle of instances where the response that I got, it's almost like when I left abuse, I was coming out of my shell. It was like a turtle coming out of its shell. And anytime I poked my head out, it got bit off. And I was like, okay, I guess that's not safe in this place or with these people to poke my head out and be, start becoming who I want to be and who I am. So I just, around my family, I tend to hide in my shell. And it's not comfortable. It feels like a self-betrayal. And I want the freedom to be myself with anybody.
Yeah.
So
have you actually said that to your parents? What you just
have
said
not.
Then?
No.
Why not?
The opportunity hasn't arisen yet.
That's
my slick answer. Make the opportunity. Well, I do have a weekend getaway with my mom on the 26th of this month, and so some of the stuff I would like to bring up and talk about. And I don't know how it'll go, but that's okay. I know what I'm responsible for, and I just want to be me.
Yeah.
And you're right. That comment you made, I forget what you said, Glenn, but it is like I'm almost waiting for other people's permission to be myself, when I'm not realizing that I am the one that gives me permission, not somebody else.
Right. And you can do it because she does it with me all the time.
Yeah.
And she did early on. And I just laughed. And I think that helped her. She would say something and say something direct. And it would just make me chuckle, because she tells me that she's, introverted, and she may be. somewhat introverted, but she tells me that she has trouble being direct and speaking her mind, but she doesn't seem to have that issue with me. So we know that she can do it. We know that people can do it. If you have one person that you feel safe around, that you can fully be yourself, once you get a taste of that, I think it's harder and harder not to be yourself around everyone. But
Yeah.
this brings up a question I have generally for Glenn, and that is, do you feel like, I think I kind of know the answer, but I think this is worth going down the trail a little bit with. Do you think that if a person is around others that they do not feel, they're not safe people, like Jen was saying, she knows that they're going to react a certain way, is it still self-betrayal to not speak up, to not be direct with them, to not say what she wants to say?
That's a very, very excellent question.
Can you repeat that, Jason? I missed the last part.
Yeah, if the person doesn't feel safe and the person knows that the people that she's around will not take it well at all, and they will not accept what the person has to say, is it still self-betrayal if they don't speak up and say the things that they want to say in front of that person or those people? Does that make more sense?
Yep.
And I use the example of she doesn't have any problem doing it with me, and I think that she would say that's because I'm a safe person. Well, that's great if you're around nothing but safe people, but so many people are not around safe people. They're around their family or could be friends or could be a spouse that they know that they're not going to respond very well to them being direct and them speaking their mind. But is it self-betrayal? If you know the person's not safe and you know that it's going to cause more problems than it's seemingly worth, is it still a self-betrayal if they don't?
I think if you think of it through the avenue of that you come first, and
Yeah.
what do you desire from the situation, I think it
Yeah.
gives you a much better opportunity to decide, like constructively, whether you want to say anything. Like Jen could say straight up, look, there's some things I don't feel safe to discuss here. To my mind, that is very much a positive thing from self.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have to say what it is until you can just say it. There's some things that don't feel safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you see what the response comes. You give the people the opportunity to respond without actually having to give away what you're thinking specifically.
Right.
Can I
for that attitude? Yeah, it's that attitude you're looking for.
Yeah.
Can I share something
Yeah.
regarding that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So when I took a break from talking with my parents last year.
Last year. Yeah.
I had written, and I written them an email, but I shared a lot of things, but I also talked with them when the break was over. And I shared with my dad, because I wasn't feeling this way toward my mom as much, but I'm realizing there's some of this there too, but with her. But I shared with my dad a couple of times that I did not feel safe with him. And he did not ask any questions. He did not respond. And that was really hurtful because coming from my perspective, I would think, gosh, if one of my kids told me they didn't feel safe with me, in my mind, I would think to ask more questions. Like, why don't you feel safe? Like, what did I do or what did I say that made you feel like you weren't safe?
It's a fair
And he
question.
didn't.
No.
And so that, in a sense, was some feedback for me that what I got from it is that he doesn't care. Pretty much, now there could be a chance that he may not know how to approach that. Like, I have no idea, but what you said was great, Glenn. And maybe I need to be more specific, but it was sort of like, I wasn't intentionally fishing, but I was putting my neck out there a little bit see how he'd respond. And he didn't respond.
Yeah. She laid it all out there.
Yeah.
She said what she wanted them to know, and there was no response. Now, So that goes into the question for a healthy person. Are they saying the things to get a response, and that's the drive behind it? Or are they saying the things because they don't want to betray themselves and they need to be said? I mean, either way, if the response is nothing, it's crickets, then that doesn't make one feel like there's a benefit to bringing these conversations up with the people that are just being silent on them.
On their end.
But I like what Glenn said, and it's not talking about the subjects that would cause issues, but it's just saying, look, I want you guys to know that I'm working on this, but there are many things that I feel uncomfortable talking to you because I get no reaction, or, I mean, whether you give them the reasons why or not is beside the point, but it's giving yourself a chance. Now, I do agree with Glenn. I've said it 100 times to you, Jen, about giving the person an opportunity to respond and not deciding ahead of time the way they're going to respond. Even if they've responded poorly in the past, if you've got something new to say that you feel like it's important they know, then you can't, I don't think you should, rather, make the decision to not give them the opportunity before it's ever happened. Because then you're deciding. You're deciding that they're not going to respond. You're deciding that your words are not worth putting them out there. And I don't think that's right either. It's a difficult thing either way.
Yeah.
But I like where we're at with this. I want to say hello to Red. Burnt Flowers Fallen. Welcome to the chat. We're glad you're here. And our friend Annette is in the chat as well. Please make them both feel welcome. I say that there's only a few people here tonight, which is fine and wonderful. We're glad that you guys are here. I think that's it. All right. So let's move forward a little bit. But I think there could be a write-up about this, because I think there are plenty of people in the healing process and the recovering process that have families of origin that they know would not take kindly to them breaking the role that they have in the family. And so is it worth it then? I mean, some people go no contact, some people do minimal contact, and those are ways to continue with recovery without feeling strangled, metaphorically, by the family of origin, not letting them be the people that they really are. I get this in the 12-step groups all the time, Al-Anon specifically, that I went to with my mother, where people are talking about this, or talking about the effect that the drinking person has on them. And they've tried over and over and over again to get them to stop, and they've done it in a mean way, they've done it in a kind way, and it just many times just leads to bigger fights and more hassle. So some people eventually decide, it's not worth it. I think there's a balance somewhere in there. Okay, so after Jen will elaborate, Glenn says this could be any relationship, such as friend, family, partner, a person in the street, etc. The fundamentals are the same. It's the gain/lost equation. Think of it this way. If we lose any relationship by speaking with compassion, integrity, and truth, did we ever have a relationship in the first place? And then the question, why do we hold back? Why are people so frightened of hurting others or being hurt? Why do we hold back? Why are people so frightened of hurting others or being hurt? I'm going to ask Nez, who's been fairly quiet, and she said she was going to wait till the questions. So now here are the questions. Nez, if you don't mind, you want to tackle this first one?
Sure. Go ahead and ask it again, please.
Sure. Why do we hold back? Why are people so frightened of hurting others or being hurt?
We are frightened of the unknown. When we don't know how somebody's going to respond when we speak truthfully, that can potentially be a volatile or dangerous situation. And so fear takes a big part in the reason why I think that people hold back when they have some truth they need to speak and they don't do it.
Yeah.
Yep. I'd agree.
Okay. Jen, why do we hold back? Why are people so frightened of hurting others or being hurt?
Definitely hanging on to Nez's answer, fear of rejection,
Sure.
and also fear of losing the relationship, the connection. But again, if you aren't able to be your true self with people, is it really a relationship? Is there actually a connection?
Right.
Because I can't help but think if somebody isn't being fully themselves in a way they're acting, even if it's just a diminished part of themselves, and that's not healthy.
Right.
It's not conducive, to the relationship itself flourishing. You're trying to be someone that you think the other person needs you to be in order for them to be okay. That's codependent and just not good.
I would agree. If the relationship, the quote above, if we lose any relationship by speaking with compassion, integrity, and truth, did we ever have a relationship in the first place? My opinion is, and I've shared this with Jen, my opinion is that all of us, to some extent, we want that relationship, especially if it's family. It's built in us. I mean, I've seen people who were abused physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally by a parent, and they went no contact, and then the parent dies, and they still react. Why is that? Well, because they're a parent. They're a major force in their life, even if they're not talking and they die. And there's a lot of unresolved things that are left for the person to go through. But I think that it isn't the reality of the relationship with the person, with the family. It's the imagination. It's what we wish we had, the relationship that we wish we had.
And that we're afraid of losing the relationship we wish we had.
That's it. That is it. So I have been saying that it's better to look at the reality of what the relationship actually is rather than the imagination of what it could be or should be. And letting go of that is way different. Letting go of the reality, the way it actually is, to me, seems easier than letting go of some imaginary thing that we wish could happen. And there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with wishing things were better. There's nothing wrong with wishing that we had a better relationship with people. It's part of who we are. It's communal. It's community. It's built in us to want that with parents and family. But if it's not there, and many people have already tried to heal it or make it better, and the only relationship that you can have is the one that they're willing to have in those cases.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So why do we hold back? I agree that it's fear. I'm going to focus more on the second part. Why are people so frightened of hurting others or being hurt? I see, to use Jen as an example, I see her as a very empathetic person. And she has shared with me that part of the reason why she ever became codependent or a people pleaser in the first place, a lot of it was self-protection. But the other thing was she didn't want to hurt people the way that she felt she was being hurt. So we hold back things sometimes from other people because we don't want to hurt them. We feel like they're going to be hurt if they know the truth. But you always end up hurting yourself if you're doing that. So then it comes back to what Glenn was referring to. And what I've said is you have to decide which relationship is more important, the one you have with the person or yourself, because they're not always around. You wake up every day and go to bed every night with you. And if you're setting yourself to the side because you don't want to hurt other people, who are you hurting then?
Yourself.
It's yourself. You're hurting yourself. And that builds up over time, and it doesn't lead anywhere good.
Nope.
All right. Glenn, what do you say? Why do we hold back? Why are people so frightened of hurting others or being hurt?
I think the three of you have covered it really well. I like particularly what you said, Cripps. But I'm going to use an example of the. As you know, I went to church about 3 weeks ago, probably.
Yep.
I have had spoken to some of these people, like afterwards and ongoing.
Yep.
Because I said that they're really nice people there.
Yeah.
And have continued that. But it's
Wonderful.
fascinating to me that at least 3 of those people have said at some point, virtually asking my permission to say something to me.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, my response is, "Hey, just spit it out. You can say anything. Just say it, please." So it was. You could feel the sensitivity. People are uncertain at times about what they can say, what they want to say, and I didn't even think of it, to be honest, because that's not me. I'm just used to being open, etc. I just ask people stuff, and if they don't like it, I just expect that they'll say, "Look, I'd rather not answer that."
Right.
Everyone's got that right, and sometimes
Right.
when people want to use it, they use it. Nobody wants to put anyone in a spot, particularly that they
Sure.
feel uncomfortable with.
Sure.
So that was sort of a different angle. They were. Then it wasn't even questions about. It could have been a question of, well, why do you believe what you believe? I mean, so people are sensitive. That really
Yeah.
did highlight that.
Yeah.
So they hold back for the simplest of things.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Well, even though, like, I understand genders is complex, but maybe this is just that. Is this a community-wide approach that people don't want to open up?
Right.
mean, I don't know. I can't answer that, but
Right.
it just seems
It
to
does.
hit me. So, what do you think? Do you think people in general are closeted, not closeted? What's the word? Just guarded about what they say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are people that aren't, obviously, but I think for the most part, people are being polite. Like you said that 3 people asked you if they could say something. Yeah. So they're being very careful, tiptoeing around what they want to say, and I think it's great that they at least asked you, and I love your reaction. Just spit it out, man. But they don't know you're like that. So if a person doesn't know whether you're going to respond well to being asked questions, yeah, I think it's more common than not that people will walk on eggshells, so to speak, at first, especially at first, until they feel comfortable around a person. Then they might feel more free to just ask whatever questions they want. Yeah, I think it's.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
Oh,
keep going.
I think it's pretty common. That's all I was going to say. Go ahead.
I just thought of the comment, whether it's relevant or not, was when the gentleman, the lay preacher guy that I mentioned, what I really liked when I first walked in there. It took me about 5 seconds to figure this guy's on the level. He came around to visit Sandra and just introduced himself. His wife was away; she would have come otherwise. It was really nice,
Mm-hmm.
And we were just chatting about what happened, and I said, when I told you I was an atheist, I could feel you close up.
Yeah.
And that's why I said to him, "I'm not here as an antagonist," and he immediately relaxed.
Yep.
So obviously, people are preconditioned.
Yeah.
In lots of areas for what they think they're going to get, and of course it does probably prevent in a lot of cases people being open for something that might be entirely different. That's just a comment.
Yeah.
Excellent. Before we continue, I want to say hello to Ajot and also Bobby Meyer. So welcome, guys, girls. We're glad that you're here. Thanks for stopping by. All right. We all answer that one, I think. Why do we hold back? Why are people so frightened or hurting others or being hurt? And the next one is, why do we tend to feel obligated for things that we have no control over? This is such a good question. Why do we tend to feel obligated for things that we have no control over? Anyone want to go first? Because I'm raring to go, but I'll yield to the floor.
Go, babe, go.
This is really a big thing, in my opinion. Why do we tend to feel obligated for things we have no control over? One is that I feel like everyone wants to control things. I have felt out of control. I felt like people made decisions for me on my behalf, starting out with my parents, deciding what I eat, what I wear, where I go, what kind of friends I can hang out with, what school I go to, what movies I can see and not see, what music I can listen to and not listen to, what books I read. Those are just a few examples that just came right off the top of my head. So I came into this life feeling controlled by other people. Now, I fought against this at every turn. And what do you expect parents to do? Just let you do whatever you want? No, but the kind of things that were controlled for me were things that should have been my decision. Yes, I understand not letting your kid watch an R movie, before they're 17. I get that, but not letting me watch things that weren't R that come on TV. It's just an example, but it was everything. It was everything that I could imagine in my life being controlled by someone else. And it wasn't just my parents, it was school. Tell me what time I have to be there. Tell me what time I can leave. Tell me when I can take my lunch and my breaks, on and on and on. What subjects I have to study. And then later you start a job and same thing, telling you what time to show up, what time you can leave, when you can have your break, when you can have your lunch. We live in this place of feeling out of control. At least I have. And so I want to control things. I want to have something I can control. So why do we tend to feel obligated for things that we have no control of? We want to make it right. We want something to work the way we think it should work in our heads. And I think this happens in relationships all the time. I have no control over the way my dad reacts to certain things or the way a friend reacts to certain things. But sometimes in the past, I've wanted to control it. I wanted to manipulate the situation so it comes out the way I want it. And that is catastrophic. You cannot control other people. I finally have gotten that, and it has made life a lot easier. But there is a feeling of obligation there's a tendency to feel obligated for things that we have no control over. It's in their hands. The way a person reacts, what they do, what they say, where they go, what they eat, what movies they watch, what books they read, they're all that person's thing to do, and we can't control it. And this is a big thing in religion too. I'll just touch on this briefly. We have people that go to seminary and become a pastor, and then they have this book, this amazing, complicated yet simple book called the Bible that they look at from their perspective. They decide what their perspective is, and then they try to control the way people see it, that they see it the way that they see it. And if you try to break away from that, then you get knocked or kicked out. If you have questions, if you have something, well, what about this perspective? People tend to want to see things the way they see it, and there's no room for anything else. But they don't have control over people, the congregation. But they try. I mean, it's everywhere. People feel obligated over things they have no control over, and it messes things up. It complicates things, and it makes people divided rather than allowing people to be who they are and not having to control that at all. And lastly, I'll say that I'm in a relationship with Jen where I have zero need to control anything. Nothing. I want her to be who she is. And when you let go of the controls and you stop doing this, you stop trying to control things you have no control over, it sets you free. I have at least one relationship where I feel completely free every hour of the day, every minute. And it is wonderful. And you can have this. You can have this feeling when you let go of control of situations and things and people that you don't have control over. Doesn't mean you don't act. It doesn't mean you don't do things. It just means that when you realize that you have no control, you can let go. Let go of the controls and do what you can control. There are things that we do have control over. We have control over whether we say something in anger, in bitterness, and hatred, or whether we say something with compassion, integrity, and truth. That's a perfect example of a choice that we have. All right. Who would like to go next? Why do we tend to feel obligated for things that we have no control over?
I'll say that I think it's a mechanism that we try to quell our anxieties.
Oh.
We feel like if we have control, it just it gives us the idea that there's peace there. You know, if we can control it and make it go the way we want it to, things will be better.
Sure.
So that's also fear. Been there, done that.
Sure.
I was going to say, I know for me, I grew up with, and I don't know how often this was said. I don't remember a lot of my childhood memories, but the comments like, you made me angry, or stop making me mad, just stuff like that.
Right.
I started getting the impression that it was my responsibility. And I think also, and feeling like it was when my dad would flip out and get super angry with something that I had done. And sometimes it was just kid stuff. And I was never, from my recollection, I don't think I was ever coming from the position of wanting to piss my dad off. It was the exact opposite. I was very hyper vigilant, trying to do everything right so that he didn't flip out.
Yep.
But that constant dynamic started making me believe that I was responsible for his feelings, his emotions.
Right. Yes.
And then it sort of morphed into me feeling responsible for the emotional atmosphere of the entire family. That's a lot of weight for a kid to carry.
Oh my gosh.
But I just felt so responsible from so many things happening that I think it's a normal conclusion for a child to come to when conversations aren't had after something goes awry or a parent gets angry and they punish you. There's no after, sit down where there's a conversation and you're told that you're still loved. You're told that, these are the things that you did that upset me or that were disrespectful. I mean, there was no conversation.
Right.
So I came to these conclusions in my child mind. And I think that's normal. But I just, because of the role in my family, by me seeing myself still as a child in a way, and my family, I think, still treating me like a child, sort of kept me in that mind space of feeling like I was responsible.
Sure.
And I think I saw my mom do it with my dad, and I think I saw my brothers do it with my dad as well. I think we all were kind of doing it in a way, and so it just was sort of learned behavior by what was happening.
Yeah.
And then that bleeds into adult life and just morphs into a monster. It's just not good.
Yeah, that's right. That's very good, Jen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nez or Glenn, you want to take this one on? Why do we tend to feel obligated for things that we have no control over?
I'll go next.
All right,
I
Nez.
think a fair amount of it goes with human nature and a spirit of pride. We naturally want to control our world around us. We want innately for things to go the way we want them to. Call it selfishness sometimes, if you will, and maybe not. Sometimes that's true, and maybe sometimes we actually do have better interests besides our own at heart, and in our mind we think we know what would be best.
Sure.
And we don't always know that. And it really is hard to let go and let God handle the situation. Um, I've struggled with that too, where I wanted to hang on to a particularly troublesome relationship, not necessarily toxic, but things weren't going well.
Yeah.
And even though I would communicate, I would still feel very, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Frustrated, because I felt like I was speaking another language. I think when you're not being heard,
Yeah.
um, and you really have to come to the point with some realizations in some relationships that the person or the people involved aren't going to hear you.
Ever.
They're not going to understand your point of view. They may care about you, they may not, but if they're, again, if you can compare it to them speaking another language, and if they don't know that language, they're
Yeah.
not going to understand you. They're not going to get it.
Excellent.
Not going to
Excellent.
happen.
Yeah. Excellent point. Thank you, Ness. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nez.
Glenn, why do we tend to feel obligated for things that we have no control over? What's your bend on that?
I think obligated because it creates the illusion of safety when people fall in line with the way we think and
Right.
behave.
Right.
But I think it's, yeah. I just got one for Jen though.
Yeah,
Jen,
bring it.
do you think you've got that monkey off your back where you in some way feel obligated / responsible for the relationship between you and your parents?
I believe I do.
Yeah.
I really believe I do.
That's
I mean, even
sweet
recently,
answer.
I feel like she's made some big headway in that area. I mean, she's been doing it the whole time. Every time this comes up, it gets a little bit more better. It gets more understandable and better. And I think sometimes it just takes people a long time, especially with family. Though the roots of this stuff are so ingrained in us, and Jen's no different. It's not just her that's dealing with it. This happens in families all the time. And a lot of it is when someone tries to break away from the role that's been chosen for them and they have agreed to play it. Because the truth is your family can make a role for you to play, but if you don't agree from the beginning, they can try to put that on you all they want. But as Jen said earlier, she was a child. She was a little girl who had these people that she looked up to, and they're punishing her and not coming to her room. That doesn't, what kind of sense does that make to a child? What kind of sense does it make for your father to get so angry his face turns red and for him to put his hands on you? So it's survival. In many cases, it's about surviving. So we become a people pleaser because we don't want our parents to put their hands on us or to punish us. So we do everything we can do. It makes total sense to me why a child would think like this, and they would try to do things to control the atmosphere in which they have to live.
Yeah.
But when they become an adult and they're no longer under the thumb of their parents, it makes sense to me why they would get out from under that. But I just know that it takes some time.
Yep.
Maybe there are people, I mean, I've seen people that seem like they can be in a relationship and everything's going well, and then something happens and they're just done. It's like they flip a switch and it's over. Now, I am not like that. I want to talk about it. I want to have closure. Some people don't have to have any of that, and they're just done. So, in the past, I've kind of revered them. I was like, oh, I wish I could be that cold, because it seems cold to me to do that, to throw away a relationship like turning off a switch. And sometimes people have to do that to protect themselves. I get that. But just in general, not to have a conversation, just be done and move on and quit answering texts and calls and emails and letters and not going over for birthdays or Christmas or any holidays or anything. There's being done. Sometimes it comes to that and people have to do it, and I get that, but I'm just looking at it from the outside. It just seems like it would be difficult to do. But anyway, these things are difficult to untangle from. But anyone that's listening to this and feels like they're in this place, I promise you can untangle yourself from it. You do not have to be in the role that your parents set for you, or society, or schools, or friends. You don't have to be who they say you are. Be who you say you are. All right. Did everyone answer that one? Yeah. Okay. Glenn continues, it's a bitter pill to swallow. The acceptance of what we desire is very different from the reality of life. The choice we must make is whether or not to acknowledge each person for who they really are. The decision we must make is whether we are prepared to work within that framework of understanding. Wow. So the first question is, what do you think of the comment above? I think Glenn nailed it here. First of all, it is a bitter pill to swallow, but it is the reality. To accept what we desire is very different from the reality of life. This is what I mentioned earlier. Looking at the ideal of the family of origin and wanting it to be a certain way, or a marriage, or a friendship, whatever it might be. We all have it. We all have this idea of the way we think it should work. And if it doesn't, if that's not the reality, then it is a bitter pill to swallow to decide to look at the reality rather than the ideal. And it's very difficult. Again, I feel it's so difficult with family, people you've grown up with your whole life, and you get to a point where you wish you could have the blessing. You wish that your family could see you for who you really are. But they have too much history. And if they do not choose to see the reality of who you are, that's not ever going to happen. So the next
and you can't
part,
force people to.
You can't. There's nothing you can do to force anyone to accept anything. And this is true about Christianity too. I mean, I've grown up in this idea that you go out winning, saving souls and all that. I'm not saying anything bad about that. But people think that if they encounter a person who doesn't believe what they're offering, that they can change their minds. I've come to the conclusion that no one can be forced to believe anything. Either they believe it or they don't. And it's not just subjugated to religion. It's with anything. Politics. If someone has a certain perspective about politics, a person can use every argument that they can think of to try to sway them over to the other side. And it's not going to happen. So why are we doing it in our relationships? And I'm talking to myself too. I've done it. I'm not, I'm putting my hand up, as Glenn says. I've done it. There's not a lot of that left for me, but it's plagued me for a very long time. And I'll use my dad for example. My dad is a lot better now than I feel he's ever been. And I don't know if it's just age. I like to think that he has matured, but the reality is that he's not a perfect person by any stretch, but he seems like he's trying in relationships. And I disconnected from that idea a long time ago. So as I tell Jen, if you are able to disconnect from the expectations of whoever this person is that you're focused on, then anything good that they do ends up being a bonus. You're not invested in them being the person, the parent, the spouse, the friend that you wish they would be. You're looking at the reality of who they actually are, and you're making a decision what level of relationship you want to have with this person based on what they're able to give and what you're willing to give. And then if down the road, when you've disconnected from all that, and they end up doing something wonderful or saying something wonderful, you're able to celebrate that with them, and you're not invested in it. This is what I hope for people. They can disconnect and unentangle themselves from some of these destructive relationships and focus on themselves, not in a selfish way, but there are so many people that have got in their minds that they don't matter, that they're just pieces of crap. And this is what allows these people to hold things over them and to say, well, you shouldn't focus on yourself at all. Well, Jesus disagreed with that. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. You know, if the verse wasn't put that way, then I wouldn't be able to say this, but there's an element in being able to love other people when you love yourself. You're loving other people like you love yourself. Well, the truth is a lot of people don't love themselves. And we've been talking about this for months
For a
and months
while.
and months, for a long time, since we started pretty much. And so what do I think about the comment above? I think he nailed it. And this is the very thing that Jen and I have been discussing. Disconnecting from the expectation that your family is going to be better than they actually are. You disconnect from that and you work on yourself. You heal, you grow, you recover. And then down the road, once you've done that, down the road, you can love them where they are because you love yourself where you are. And that gives you the ability to do exactly what Jesus said. Love your neighbor as yourself. It can't happen, in my opinion, without first loving who you are. Glenn's brought this up several times, and when he first brought it up, it blew my mind. How can a person love someone else if they don't love themselves? And talk about a hard pill to swallow. It's hard to wrap your mind around that at first. It's like, well, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to love other people, hold them up higher than you. Well, how can you even do that if you don't love who you are? If there's a discrepancy in your relationship with yourself, how are you ever going to do that with anyone else? How's that ever going to happen? If someone has an answer to that, I'm open to hearing it. I don't know how it happens. I've looked at it for a very long time, and I've come to the conclusion that you put your own mask on first, and then you can help others. It's the way it's set up. It's intuitive. Okay, that's my answer. What do you think of the comment above, Nez?
I think it's 100% spot on.
Yeah.
We have to be ready to deal with people as they are, as they come. And at the same time, we can best do that when we see ourselves as who we are and behave that way. We're not helping anybody by putting on a show or playing pretend.
Yeah.
Sorry, short answer, but I think
That's okay. Yeah, your answer's
Poignant.
Jen, how about you? The comment above. Excuse me.
What was the comment again, please?
Sure. It's a bitter pill to swallow. The acceptance of what we desire is very different from the reality of life. The choice we must make is whether or not to acknowledge each person for who they really are. The decision we must make is whether we are prepared to work within that framework of understanding.
I think it's spot on.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling Nez before the show, getting to this place where I am with my parents and my family, it's been surprising because the letting go, just in a way, not giving AF, it's allowed me to love them the way I want to love them.
There it is.
Because it's not an attempt to love who I hope they would be or who I've always prayed that they would be, or this mirage I've had in my mind of who they are, which never lines up with the reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's freed me to truly love them where they're at and who they are and their own struggles, their own humanness. Mm-hmm. And that's very surprising to me because I think, this might sound really weird, but I think I thought that the not caring anymore would mean that I wouldn't love them in a way.
Yes.
But it's been the opposite.
Right.
And that's been surprising. And I didn't want to not love them. You know what I mean? That wasn't like a goal of mine. That's not me at all.
No, it's not.
But I felt like I almost had to cut off the love altogether for me to be okay, for me to move on and not care.
Yeah, that took going don't mean to interrupt, but that took going no contact for months.
Yeah.
To even get there.
Yeah. I really had to grieve, like deeply grieve the loss of this image that I had in my mind of what family was going to look like and what my relationship with my parents and brothers were going to look like and what my relationship with my family and you looked like.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there was a lot to grieve, and I cried a handful of times, like really ugly, deep, guttural crying.
Yeah.
Because it just was so heartbreaking. But I'm glad I allowed that grief to come up and deal with it and just let it out, because it just was stored in my body and just rummaging around in there, popping its head up every once in a while. And it was really painful.
Yep.
But letting go of that image, that wish or that prayer or whatever you want to call it, was a big deal. It was keeping me stuck.
Yeah. And
so the process after that, it was very beneficial.
Yeah.
And it was scary, grieving something like that, where these hurts and these hopes go all the way back to childhood. It's very painful. And in the moments, and you can attest to this, well, maybe you can't, it's more of an inner thing, but I thought I would never stop crying.
Yeah.
It was so painful. And I just, in the moment of it, I thought I'm just never going to be okay.
Yeah.
But I was. Yeah. And every time after that first time, especially, that I went through the grief process and just allowed myself to truly grieve what wasn't. It was a part of me swallowing that bitter pill and looking reality in the face and truly saying, this is what it is.
This is
truly what it is.
Yeah.
And I need to accept it and remember that the only control I have is over me. Yeah. And changing myself and being a better person and loving people better and accepting myself and all of those things. And so, and every time after that first time, it got a little bit better and a little bit better, which surprised me, because it just felt like it just was always going to be that painful.
Yeah.
So
that's the way grief feels sometimes.
Yeah.
It feels
and
like,
I honored that, I honored how it felt in the moment.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the reality, the feelings that I was feeling, that wasn't the reality either.
Right.
So.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jen. Appreciate you sharing that. Glenn, what do you think of the comment above?
I think whoever wrote this must be a genius.
Wait, who's a genius?
I think in some ways you are a genius, even though you think that you can't have a conversation about string theory or.
I could have a cursory conversation.
Okay.
But Jen, what I was just thinking when you said that is how free it feels for you to speak in this forum, but yet how comparing the difficulty it is when you get in a forum with your parents.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just like chalk and cheese, isn't it? So,
it is. Chalk and cheese.
Which is sad.
Yeah. It is. I was going to share a little story, and I think I mentioned this to you, Glenn, but after y'all's visit, when you came to Virginia, I was having, I think, devotions with my parents, and my parents were opening up and they were talking. My mom was talking about her childhood a little bit, which I always treasure when they open up about past stuff, because they never really do.
Yeah.
And it's like they're a mystery to me. And there's this deep longing of wanting to know them. I've always had this longing to know my family, not the surfacey stuff, but the deep parts of them.
Yep.
That's just who I am. And I asked her a question after she shared something. And granted, I was coming from this place where you and Cripps and I were talking all the time. And so it was in this safe forum that I was able to ask questions of you guys and it not be weird or intrusive. It just was open and safe. And so I was sort of testing the waters with my parents, and I wasn't purposely testing the waters. It was more of like me sticking my head out of my shell to try to be more of me that has been hidden my whole life. And my mom made a comment instead of answering the question, she said, I feel like you're trying to be like Glenn.
Yeah.
And it was like a punch in the gut. And this is one of those instances that I've had where I'm trying to be me.
Yeah.
And I'm getting accused of trying to be somebody else.
Yep.
So, it just, damn, it hurt like really bad. And it was another sign for me to retreat back into my shell. Like, I am not going to be accepted here.
Right.
It's not safe.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was trying to show a part of myself to my parents that they don't normally see. And it was rejected.
Mm-hmm.
That was tough.
Yeah, I know it was tough. And this is a typical reaction when someone is trying to change. And they don't like it. They don't like you changing the role that you've been given. You should just take your script, play the role that you were given, and shut up. I mean, that's blunt, but that's what it is. That's, in my opinion, that's what it is. So when you break out of that and you start using different language and you start focusing on other things, especially deep things that they don't want to focus on, and not just your parents, just anybody in that family situation or marriage or friendships or whatever. It's not just relegated to family. It's in all relationships. They don't want you to change. They want you to be who they're used to being. This happens in marriages all the time, where someone starts to change and the other person says, "You're not the man I married," or "You're not the woman I married." Well, you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be the man or woman that you married. You should be changing. You should be growing. And I think when people get married, they should say this in the vows. I know that you're going to grow and you're going to change, and I accept you. I accept you for who you have been. I accept you for who you are now, and I accept you for who you're going to be. And I will love that person with all my heart. Now, that's crazy that would ever happen, but I think it should be. And we should do that with family. Love me, know me for who I am, and I will do the same for you. It seems so simplistic to say it, but it seems so difficult in application.
Yeah.
But I'm not demeaning your experience by saying that this is a common response, but
No.
You met two people that you could be completely open with and ask questions and answer questions and talk, and you loved it. You opened up like a flower that had been closed up, and the nighttime comes, the moon comes out, and the thing just opens up. That's and it was wonderful to be a part of that. I'm still a part of it. I married you. So I get to see it every day. I get to see you open up and find out who you are and be that person.
Yeah.
And if you can do it, other people can do it. Anybody listening, if you feel closed up and you're in a family situation or marriage like this, as difficult as it might be, as bitter a pill to swallow as you could possibly imagine, you can learn how to speak up for who you are.
Yeah. And a different perspective that I was just thinking of when you were talking, I was paying attention, I swear. I do wonder at times if I'm to flip it, like flip the situation when it comes to my family. I do wonder if, hopefully I can word this correctly, if there has been some angst, for lack of a better word to describe it. I wonder if it's been observable or felt when it comes to me loving this side of my family or this part of each of my family members, when it hasn't been truly who they are, if that was felt and if that was difficult on their end at all. Does that make sense? Like if somebody else has you on a pedestal, I don't know how to explain it. Like if I'm loving a mirage of who I want my family to be or expect them to be or hope and pray that they would be, how does that affect the other person that's projected onto?
Oh yeah, I get it. I get it. So if you're oh wow. So if you're seeing someone not for the reality of who they are, but you're putting them up in this other ideal place, the ideal
Yeah.
relationship, the ideal parent, the ideal friend, the ideal wife, husband, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
then that puts something on them that they can't attain. And if you've accepted that in your mind, you're always trying to look at them as this person that they are not.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point, Jen. So that it isn't just bad for you imagining the ideal, it's bad for the other person, because when they don't react like the ideal that you have set in your mind, I mean, that still is expectations. That's expecting them to be who you want them to be, and they're not that.
Yeah.
And that's tough on them too. Whether
And I
you
do
ever,
wonder, yeah, I do wonder if people can sense when they're not fully being accepted. And I mean, I guess they can because I do.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. Wow, good point. Um, okay. We all answered that one. Glenn then says, I'm hoping many of us will have experiences and questions to share on this front. Obviously, we did. Thanks, Jen, for allowing this to be used. Okay, so moving on, do we consider why we say things like, you always overreact, you don't understand me, you're just like my last partner, you should just get over it, you always get this wrong, you are too sensitive, I refuse to discuss this. So what I'd like to do is answer the question underneath these first, and then if we want to focus on some of the individual statements, there's a lot there that we can talk about, because some of them I get triggered a little bit just looking, not in a negative way, but I've heard some of these things said to me. Particularly, I refuse to discuss this. I think it's so hilarious that someone can just decide this conversation's over and just be done. Anyway. The question is, what might we have said rather than the above? When might we have said nothing? What might we have said rather than the above? When might we have said nothing? Go ahead, Jen. You did it.
Oh, I was thinking that was my
Oh.
brain kicking into gear. It's audible. Sorry.
I mean, just pick one and think about. I mean, you can do it however you want, but just say how it makes you feel and what you would prefer to have heard, or if we say these things to someone else, how can we change how we say and still get our point across?
Yeah. Well, the big one for me is you are too sensitive. I got that a lot growing up.
Yeah.
Now, when it says we, what might we have said rather than the above? Is that coming from the person that's saying it, I'm guessing, or the response to the quote?
Do we consider
do
why
as you
we,
will, Jen. Whatever way
Okay.
you take it.
yeah.
I think that the you are too sensitive comment is very invalidating. It pretty much taught me that my feelings were stupid and not acceptable. I would have much rather my parents sit down with me and help me explore my feelings, to be honest. Why do you feel that way?
Yes.
Or what happened that made you feel that way? It just would have showed some care and concern about my feelings instead of writing it off and flipping it back on me like having feelings in the first place was wrong. It almost gave this precedence of what you're upset about is stupid as shit and you shouldn't be upset. Get over it.
Yeah.
That's what the message I was getting.
Yep.
Which then rolled into me stuffing feelings.
Yeah.
Which was not good for connection. It wasn't good for relationship.
No.
It wasn't good for growth. And it set me up for a whole world of hurt later on. It's just like, and even with people pleasing, I think with people pleasing, we tend to stuff our true feelings. We're not being real. We're not sharing. We're not connecting. And this whole you're too sensitive, it kind of sets up a dynamic of feeling responsible for other people's feelings, because what happened was I would turn it back on myself. Like I've upset them for having feelings and for feeling this way and for even bringing it up.
Yep.
So what do I do next time? I don't say anything.
Right.
And I swallow it.
Yep.
It's not safe to share.
Yeah. And that has been catastrophic for you.
Yeah.
And you're finally getting the point where you're not being shut up anymore.
Exactly.
And it's way better. And I know for a fact that you're not the only one that struggles with this. People have been silenced. I mean, some of these, I didn't get you always overreact. What I got was you should just get over it. And I got, if I would get upset about something, go up to your room and come back down when you're ready to be happy. I have always been an emotional person, and I shared my emotions when I felt something, whether it was anger or sadness or happiness or whatever. Everyone's fine when you're happy. Well, almost. Sometimes I'd be in a real weird mood and I'd be a little too happy, and people would react to that. I couldn't win. And instead of me learning, I did the opposite of Jen. Instead of just shutting up, I got worse at expressing my feelings, and I did it in anger a lot of times because I got frustrated with someone trying to shut me up or not listening to what I had to say. Now, there were times I didn't say anything. There were. But I had confrontations most with my family because I didn't shut up. If something hurt me or upset me, I said, well, that was hurtful. And I think that's fair, but it's the way I did it sometimes that caused more of a problem than it needed to. I wish I had been this healthy when I was a kid or when I was a teenager or when I was in my early 20s to be direct and say, you know what you just said was hurtful and it didn't make me feel good. And I'll deal with that. But why do you have to say things like that to me?
Yeah.
And I have done that to other people too. Mostly it's out of my own hurt, out of my own wound. And that's the way people live. They live in their wound that they don't deal with, their own hurts. See, every parent had a parent. Everyone that's a parent had a parent. You know, they were a child once. So they had someone else doing similar things to them. I mean, maybe there's a perfect case where your parents were just gold. They were understanding and loving. And when you got upset, they sat down with you, held your hand and said, you know, what are you reacting to? Why are you, tell me how you feel. Share it with me. And that be a safe place. I'm not a parent, but Jen and I have had many discussions. If we were parents, what would we say? It's one of my favorite games that she plays. We'll be watching a TV show or something, and she'll say, how would you react to your child in that situation? And I love thinking about it because I would recreate some of the things that my parents did for me that were good.
Yeah.
And there were many. And I would eradicate, if at all possible, the things that I felt like didn't help me become a healthy member of society and didn't help me to have a strong self-esteem. See, I'm doing that for myself now. In psychobabble, they call it self-parenting. Because that's all you're left with. When you become an adult, the only choice you have, in my opinion, is to either sit in the dysfunction and the pain and the wounds that you were dealt, or you look at them long enough for you to heal them and you parent yourself. If your parents aren't involved and they're not engaging with you, as an adult friendship, then you have to give that gift to yourself. I love hearing Glenn talk about the way he sees the relationship with his kids. You know, they're older now, and he sees them as mates. And I think that's wonderful. When you become an adult, it would be great just to have a relationship, a friendship with your parents. And I think you can do that. I think once you, as we said earlier, let go of the expectations that they're going to be something that they're not, and you work on you, then eventually you can get to the point where you're able to love them where they are. As Paradox said earlier, let me find it. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to move my microphone over a little bit so I can see it. Why not just choose to see them as human like we are? They have their own struggles too. And then they follow up with accepting that these people are loving us according to their own personality, not like we want and expect them to give us.
That's a part of the process.
It is part of the process. It's exactly what we're talking about. Paradox is absolutely right, in my opinion, on this. Part of the process is accepting them as being human, with all their flaws, with all their wounds, with everything. That is looking at the reality, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's not the ideal, because, look, your parents are flawed. Whoever your parents are, they're flawed. A lot of times they did the best they could as a result of their own parenting. And could be generational, could be all sorts of things that weigh into that. Now, it's great when a parent decides to do the wound healing and recovery and self-healing so that they can have better relationships, but a lot of times that doesn't ever happen. Unfortunately, it happened to me. My mom was in counseling and she became a counselor. That's like the best case scenario you can ever hope to imagine. Now, was she a perfect person because she had been in counseling and she became a counselor? Absolutely not. But there was more of an opportunity for me to have conversations about hard stuff with her than there would have been if she had never done that. And it changed my life forever. The meetings and everything that I went to with her and my own counseling, it put me in a position to be able to work on my own wounds and be able to be more available to any relationship that I have. But still, I'm only able to have the level of relationship with any person that they are willing to have. Jen briefly mentioned letting go of the ideal of her expectations of what kind of relationship her family would have with me. When I met them, I think it was on day one, or it might have been shortly after that. And I stated to both Jen's parents that I desire to have a relationship with you, and it will be as deep as you guys are able to have it be. And I've stated it more than once. And we've made a lot of progress, but I know that if they're not able to go deep, if they're not able to be open and authentic, then that's never going to happen. I accept that. And accepting it makes it a lot easier to be around them. And I think that's true about anybody. The thing is, I don't struggle with them because they're not my family. I didn't grow up with them. So I'm coming from the outside. It's a lot easier for me to accept things that they say and just kind of react to them, you know. It's harder for the person that did grow up with them. But accepting them for who they are, looking at the reality of who they are, and loving them where they're at, that is part of the process. That is the goal, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think for me, the tough part is letting go of the mirage.
Yeah.
That's been the toughest hurdle, because it's my deepest desire to love them in the way that I love and to be loved back. And I, in the same way. And I realized, and Glenn and I have had conversations about, expecting love from someone the way you give it. We're all different. We all show love differently. We've all have different stories and different traumas and different parenting. As you were saying before, everybody has a parent.
Yeah.
And I think it was last summer I realized the position I was in was like ridiculous, because I was thinking I'm trying to control them. I'm trying to control how they love me. Like, how awful is that? It's just not good,
Yeah.
But it was coming from a good place, but it was also coming from my own self-esteem being so incredibly wrapped up in their approval and their acceptance.
Yeah.
And so I just had to learn to be grateful for the people that were showing me love in those ways where
Yes.
in my love languages, but also loving myself in that way. That
Yeah.
was another big sticker because it was almost like I was basing me loving who I am on whether or not these other intricate people in my life loved me in that way.
Yeah.
It was like until that happened, I wasn't worthy of
Mhm.
loving myself and accepting myself and
Right.
celebrating who God created me to be. And that was a big hang up too. And so this whole thing has been very, very healing.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And I will be honest, I hate that this has taken so freaking long and that it's been a little bit of a carousel. I'm like, what the heck? I thought I got this. Like, but I do believe that every rotation, if you will,
Yeah.
I've learned a little bit more and a little bit more. And, I think you and I, Jason, the other day, we were talking about how frustrating it is to think you've arrived and you're like, I'm
Yeah.
healed and I've
Yeah.
got this. And then something comes up and it kicks you in the nuts and you're like, are you serious? Like, I thought I got this. I thought I
Yep.
was done with this. Like,
Yep.
what the heck? But I do think there's so much truth in God allowing things to happen over and over to an extent.
Mhm.
Because there's still something that we need to learn from it. There's still deeper lessons. And I'm astounded at how life, it's like the earth school we talk about.
Yeah.
It is a school. It's learning about other people. It's learning about ourselves. Oh man. Thanks.
Yeah. It was wonderful. Okay. I'm going to move on unless someone else wants to say something about the negative side of or what I see to be the negative,
Me.
why we say things like I listed. Does anyone want to
Okay.
comment on that?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Quickly.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just thinking while you were speaking, although it's not been for a long time, I can see myself having said all but two of those.
Oh, yeah.
The one, you are just like my last partner. I wouldn't say that ever. And I refuse to discuss this. I wouldn't say that ever. But the others I can see that I said. Now, why did I say it? Just thinking
Right.
about it.
Yeah.
I think this is in response to something that's been said to me that I didn't like. I've
Right.
gone on the defensive.
Hmm.
I think that's a defensive comment and it's
Yep.
shifting my shit sideways onto somebody else.
That's it.
And when I look at those comments, there's absolutely no room or will or wish or desire to communicate what the issue is and discuss it. It's
Yeah.
just they're like cutting comments that just take a person down, and who would feel like coming to the table with when I have done that to someone? I can just see it clearly. No wonder they would switch off.
Yeah.
So
I agree, Glenn. It is defensive, and the other aspect of there's a couple of these that have what are called eternal quantifiers. Like you always get this wrong, you always overreact. In relationships, I think it's catastrophic to use these things because it's very rarely ever true that someone always overreacts or that they always get something wrong. I have said some of these things too, particularly, you don't understand me. I have felt that my whole life that people didn't understand me. Um, I felt kind of like an outsider in a lot of ways. Um, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that. I've never said you're just like my last partner. Thankfully, that's never even come into my head because that's not at all true. And I haven't said you should just get over it because that was said to me a lot. Just get over it. If I was feeling something and I'm ruminating on it, and the reason I'm ruminating on it is because it's hurtful, and I wanna have closure. I wanna figure it out. I very much am a person that has to get to the bottom of things, and I've worked on that too. Yeah, I've worked on that too. But you should just get over it. That's a big one. I don't use a lot of eternal quantifiers, but I may not have said exactly these same things to people, but I've said things like them, in my own way. and it very much is defensive, and I'm trying to live a life where I'm not acting on the defensive. It still happens sometimes. I've done it a couple times with Jen, but the thing about me where I'm at now, I've always processed things. And so if I say something defensively, I come back when I've thought about it, and I will take responsibility for what I said. And we'll even talk about why I think I said it. And that's not a pat me on the back thing. I'm just saying that we can get, if I can do it, anybody can do it. You can get to the point, if you said these things to other people, you can get to the point where you choose some of the things we're about to go over instead. Anyone else want to comment on the above?
I didn't get a turn.
Oh, I want you to have a turn. I always want you to have a turn. I just didn't know if you wanted to have a turn. Go ahead, Ness.
Just quickly, I look at these statements and it takes me back to red flags for narcissism. These are all very demeaning, invalidating, confrontational, manipulative pieces of shit things to say one
Sure.
person to another. And if I just wanted to say, if anybody's getting this treatment from somebody you're in a relationship with, hello, ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Please find a way to safely get free of this toxic person. I personally, I'm sure there's been a time or two I might have said maybe one or two of these things. I agree with Glenn, though. I've never said you're just like my last partner. I would just, that's comparing, that's triangulation, that's manipulation. Yeah. That's, I could go through the whole list, but, and just what I wish other people would have said when these things were said to me would have been along the lines like Jen was saying, exploring my feelings on the subject instead of making assumptions and grand finalization statements that are meant to put you down. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. So much of the above can be from not thinking, ignorance, wishing to hurt, etc. Now, before we move on, I just want to, that's an excellent point. And Jen and I have talked about this as well. Our parents sometimes say things out of ignorance. They say things, as I mentioned, because of the way they brought up. They have their own wound. They have their own stories. When Jen was talking about her parents telling them some of these stories, I was there for part of that. And I got a chance to hear from both of them a little bit about what they went through as a kid. And it helped me understand why they struggle with certain things. And it doesn't mean they get a pass. It doesn't mean that they can continue to treat you in a certain way that isn't healthy for you. It just helps you understand it. If you're trying to get to the point where you accept the reality of where they are, this is something that helps. If they're willing to share stories about how they grew up and what their parents were like to them, it can give you inroads to understanding them better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And a lot of it is ignorance. Sometimes they just don't understand. They don't get it. And it happens every generation. Every generation, the kids grow up and they look at their parents and they think, well, you're out of touch. You have no idea what's going on in the world right now. Well, you have no idea what went on in their world. I mean, they grew up in this different time when things were very, very different, and they can't let go of it. It has formed their perception to the point where they can't see anything else. And again, it's not an excuse for them. I'm just saying that in the situation that we're talking about, where the person isn't going to change and you don't have any control over them, if you want to have a relationship with them, you have to see them for who they are, love yourself, deal with your own wounds, and then you may get to the point where you're able to love them where they are. It's the best chance you have, in my opinion. All right. So the next sentence is, now, what about the things we say to people to show we care? Things like, just ask if you want something from me. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm interested in your opinion. You are important to me. You look great. I enjoy your company. And I miss you. It's often said that words are cheap. Perhaps they're only cheap if the words above are just catchphrases that are not sincerely meant. So the first question is, why do we say things we don't mean? Do you find it acceptable in some cases to do so? Jen, why do we say things we don't mean, and do you find it acceptable in some cases to do so?
As in the things that were shared above, the comments?
I think it's overall everything that we're taught. Why do we say things we don't mean? Why do you
Like
think
negative or positive?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes I think we feel the need to placate.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back into survival and fear of rejection or losing the relationship. But if it's something negative, I think sometimes, like what Glenn said, your stuff just comes out sideways.
Yeah.
You know, it's something going on internally and it just comes out at somebody, the nearest target.
Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah.
We're trying to like expel anger or upset feelings and it just comes out at somebody else.
Yep.
Sometimes it's because you were jolted awake by somebody dropping their phone on the floor.
Go ahead. Share what happened.
This morning I reached over to get my phone and the way I was positioned was kind of off and I was overhanding trying to pick it up and I dropped it on the floor and Jason had just come back from the bathroom and he was like drifting back off to sleep and it jolted him awake. And I forget what you said, but it was really guilting and shaming. It was so unlike you. It was something along the lines of, you know, I really wish you could be a little more careful with your phone. I don't want us to have to buy you another one.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Something like that. And I was like, damn.
She said,
I said, wow.
She said, wow. And then she got up and left the room. I said, where are you going?
I had to go to the bathroom, but I was also like, I need to process this.
Yeah, she did. And she didn't come back to the room. And we talked about that.
We had a good talk about it. Jason came out and apologized. And
yeah.
And I even had to look at me not coming back to the room and actually having a discussion about what was said. That kind of, not that the whole thing was from this particular perspective, but I had to look at, wow, okay, I think there's a form of punishment in there. Like if you're going to say something like that and guilt and shame me, even though it really didn't penetrate, you know, it didn't like kick me in the balls kind of a thing.
Right.
But I had to, you know, take a good look at that and be like, okay, because we talk about, you know, I asked him, what would you prefer when something like that happens? You know, we talk about how we would prefer each other to approach each other or not react as in we're trying to control each other's reactions, but just how we would like to see it play out more healthily. If that's a word.
It is now.
Yeah. And we had a good conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fine.
And I didn't like that I said that. I did react, and she described it accurately that I was drifting off to sleep again. And it startled me first and foremost. And it just popped out of my mouth. Now, fortunately, things like that don't happen often at all for me. And I realize I'm human. I realize that I'm capable of being triggered, or I'm capable of letting it sally forth out of my mouth. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as I said, I process things. It didn't take me long to process this one. I was thinking about why in the world would I say that? It isn't how I feel. I went on to tell her when we talked about it there was some truth in what I said. I do wish she would be more careful with her phone, but
if you drop it a lot,
she is more important than any phone. And for me to say that to her, I don't want to say anything hurtful to her ever. And it was hurtful. It was guilty and shamey. I'm glad it didn't penetrate, but it wasn't something I liked. So there was I did mean some of what I said, but the way I said it and the tone that I used to say it, I don't find acceptable. I don't ever want to talk to her in an angry tone or an irritated or annoyed tone. I don't want that. So let's hear from Nez. Nez, why do we say things we don't mean, and do you find it acceptable in some cases to do so?
Sometimes, like your example, you're just shooting from the hip and saying the first thing that comes to your lips, whether that's a good idea or not. Emotions will do that to you.
Yeah.
And it happens, but you guys took care of the situation in a healthy way, so that's good.
Yeah.
But sometimes, yeah, I think we all have a tendency to let words come out that maybe we should reconfigurate to better words or just not go there.
Right.
And do we find it acceptable in some cases to do so? If we're saying something that we don't mean, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
That's might as well say, is it okay to lie? And the answer is going to be no. So.
Right. Well, and thank you, Nez. In my example, I did mean some of it, right? So
Yeah.
there's that, but I could have said it better. I wish I would have said it in more of a loving way, because you can say what you mean. I forget who said it in the chat. I think I forget who said it, but they were saying, mean what you say and say what you mean. And what I have heard, to add to the end of that, mean what you say what you mean, but don't say it mean. And I love that. I think that's great. We should say what we mean and mean what we say, but we don't have to be jerks about it. We don't. So that's what I strive to, not be a jerk about it. I think we say things we don't mean, as Jen said, to placate people, to not rock the boat. I think there's numerous reasons why we do that. I don't find it acceptable in some cases not to say what we mean. I would want to be a person that always says what they mean. Now, there may be times when, as we were talking about earlier, there may be times when we know the person and we know where it's going to go, and there may not be a point to share that with them. Share it with someone that you know that you can trust. And that's just my opinion. It could be wrong, but I feel like there are certain conversations I can't have with certain people. And I don't feel like I'm not being myself. There are other ways I can be myself around those people. I'll give a quick example. One of my oldest friends, Marcus, I've talked about him before. We've known each other since we were 7 and 5. He's 2 years younger than me. And he was the first person I met when we moved to Charlotte, in the neighborhood where I spent the first 7-8 years of my life. And we have remained friends. And now, truly, he and I can talk about anything, but there are certain subjects that get him riled up, and he doesn't want to talk about it. It's difficult for him to discuss it. And so I try to just steer clear of talking about those particular things. It doesn't mean I'm not being myself. I have people that I can talk to about the subjects that, like politics is one of them. In the past, we get very heated about politics. We're on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to politics. Now we're really on opposite ends because I am not political at all. They're two sides of the same coin, in my opinion. It's all play acting. Might as well be a stage, and they hand politicians a script, and they're reading off the script. That's my opinion. So it's a little easier for me to bring things up because he can get riled up, but I just stay calm because I have no skin in that game. But the point is, sometimes it's not that it's acceptable in some cases to not mean what we say or say what we mean. I just think there are times you can choose to opt out and not say it. Glenn, why do we say things we don't mean? Do you find it acceptable in some cases to do so?
I think sometimes we say things we don't mean to ingratiate ourselves. Personally, I'm not interested in telling lies for that reason. I try to find a way to say what I'm thinking without lying about it. Now,
Right.
unless it's Sandra, because I don't have to think. I just recall one episode, and I'll keep it quick. Is that this is before she had a stroke.
Right.
We had to go to some party, and she had to find a dress, and she'd always say, "Well, you come in." She always says, "Come in and said, give me your opinion. The lady outside the cubicle she put one on. And she said, what do you think? I said, it's horrible. And the lady outside must have heard it. So when we opened the door to go get another dress, she said, oh, how could you say that? And to Sandra, how could you say that something's horrible like that? Just so blunt. And Sandra said, that's exactly what I want him to say. I want him to tell me what he thinks.
Yeah.
That's it. It's the truth. But some people can't handle that.
Right.
Because then what? But conversely, if she puts on something that's really nice, I'm going to say that looks fantastic.
Yeah.
It's not like everything's horrible.
Right.
No. It's just being willing to give that opinion. So I am interested in. She's interested in my opinion. I'm interested in hers, which is one of those comments.
Yeah, so. I feel that too. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
What are the possible rewards / consequences for making comments not meant? What are the possible rewards / consequences for making comments not meant? I think first and foremost, you are not being yourself. So if you're saying things that you don't mean, you're essentially a liar, really. And the rewards may be that you avoid a difficult conversation. The consequences would be that you know what you really meant to say and you didn't say it. So you're shutting yourself up. And you're doing a disservice to the relationship, in my opinion. I think Glenn's example is a good one. I feel the same way with Jen. I can say whatever I want to say and know that even if she doesn't like it, we'll talk about it and we'll work through it. And that is a great place to be in with a person. Now, not all my relationships are like that. I have many that aren't like that. But if I'm going to say anything, I want it to be what I mean to say. And damn the consequences. The rewards for me when I say what I mean is that I can live with myself. I can know that I have integrity with myself. And to me, that's worth it. What do you think, Jen? What are the possible rewards / consequences for making comments not meant?
I really like the point you made, not being genuine.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know why this is a tougher question for me. Repeat it one more time.
Absolutely. What are the possible rewards / consequences for making comments not meant?
I don't know if there's any reward, because anytime you're saying, even if it's something nice about someone that you don't mean and you see that they react, it feels icky because you know you're not being honest.
Yep.
And I think the same is for the flip side of that coin, at least for me. I mean, maybe some people get a joy out of saying something they don't mean. I definitely do not.
No.
Whether it's something flattering or something mean, it feels icky to me. Yeah, I don't think there's any reward.
Okay.
That'd be my answer, kind of short.
Yeah, that's okay. Nez, what are the possible rewards / consequences for making comments not meant, if any?
I think on a shallow level, Jen brought up flattery. I think some people, they think they can curry favor, and maybe some even do get certain benefits, special treatment, etc. But that's still dishonest at its core.
Yeah. Right.
And that's still hardly a genuine reward. It's maybe a temporary fix.
Sure.
A way for someone who might get their jollies doing that.
Yeah.
But I don't think there is a reward for that.
Yeah. Thank you, Marisa.
Mm-hmm.
Glenn, what are the possible rewards / consequences for making comments not meant?
I think there may be a very, superficial reward, but I see it more that any reward is short term.
Yeah.
But the consequences are long term.
Yeah. That's a good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, last question. What are the possible rewards / consequences for making honest comments? Who wants to take this one? Go ahead,
I'll
Jen.
go first.
All right.
Being authentic.
Yeah.
Showing your real self.
Mm-hmm.
The possibility of being embraced, even though there's a risk of being rejected.
Yep.
being seen, being heard.
Yeah.
Those are definitely rewards.
Yeah.
And being honest, being truthful.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, I forget the word. It's underrated
Yeah.
a lot in
It,
this day and age.
it's its own reward,
Yeah.
being honest. And I'll copy all of yours for the sake of time and agree with everything that you just said, Jen. And I'll just add to that over time, a person can know that if they ask, it's exactly what Glenn was saying. She wanted to hear the truth from him, and he is truthful with her. Even if other people on the outside don't like it or understand it, a person, if you're always honest, they're going to be able to trust you to be honest, and they're going to come to you with bigger things and ask your opinion because they know that they're going to hear the truth. That's one of the biggest rewards I can think of. What do you think, Marisa? What are the possible rewards? I say rewards weird. Rewards / consequences for making honest comments.
Well, ultimately, you do get the reward of being sincere and being honest and genuine,
Sure.
and that is its own reward.
Yeah.
But bear in mind that you may face some consequences and some very steep ones if you tell the truth. Not everybody's going to like what you have to say. Not everybody's going to agree with what you have to say.
Right.
And there may be things that happen because you express yourself in a truthful fashion that might not be so pleasant to encounter, but still, telling the truth supersedes any of that, in my opinion.
Excellent. Glenn, you're up last on this one. That seems apropos. What are the possible rewards / consequence for making honest comments?
I think it's the converse of my previous comment. I think the consequences might be short term, but the rewards are going to be long term.
Perfect answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. The choice of words is for you to decide. We all say things at times that come back to bite us. Isn't that the truth? I believe the real bite is when we make excuses, defend the indefensible. It costs nothing to admit I was wrong. And then, quote, words so honest and so innocent and powerless as they are, as standing in a dictionary, how potent for good and evil they become in the hands of one who knows how to combine them. Nathaniel Hawthorne. Well, this has been a wonderful episode. We hope everyone in the chat has enjoyed it. I want to say a quick hello and good night to Wisconsin Greg. He said, I came in late, but I'm here. That's it. You get it. We're happy anyone comes. Whenever you guys come, we're just happy that you're here. So thank you for coming, everyone. And thank you for listening to the playback. We appreciate you. We still invite everyone to come into the chat and have even just to say hello if you'd like. Just come in and say hello. If you have to leave, you have to leave. No problem. We appreciate everyone that listens to the playback. Thank you. And I hope everyone has a good week coming up. We'll see you next Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's a new month. It's hot here in the Carolinas. And try to stay cool if it's hot where you are. And remember that whatever you're dealing with, you have choices. There are some things we can't control, but there are other things that relate to us as people in the world that you can control. Find out what those are and live in that truth. It's kind of, cliche, but in Al-Anon and most of the 12-step groups, the Serenity Prayer helped me to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that's one of the best phrases or sentences or whatever that there could ever be. I think it applies to everyone, whether they see it or not. Accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two of those. Huge. So thank you for listening, and have a good night. Jen, could you take a minute and say goodbye to the peoples, please?
Absolutely. Guys, this was a great write up, Glenn. And I think we all go through this junk, and it's hard. We're all on different, spots, all different areas of this journey of healing and getting over traumas and stuff we grew up with that's harmed us.
Mhm.
But I think it's just imperative to work through it. And it's great to have a group of friends to talk about it, even have these discussions to
Yeah.
share and weigh in and discuss and being redundant. This was a lovely talk, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks for the write up. Thanks for the answers and the discussion. And thanks for everybody in the chat for being a part of it. We really appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
Have a great week. And we cannot wait to see or read or hear Glenn's next part of this write up, part 7. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you, Jen. Glenn, take a minute to say goodbye to the peoples, please.
I shall say good night, and my little gem, if you can call it that, is that thoughtful, authentic words cost no more than those negative ones.
Right. Wonderful.
Good night.
Thank you, Glenn. Last but certainly not least, Marisa, if you could say goodbye to the peoples and close us down, if you don't mind.
No problem. And hello and good evening to John Dons, your friend who just slipped in at the last minute. Yes. Hello, John. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. What a wonderful discussion. Thank you, Glenn. This has been, we could have gone on. I feel like we could have just gone another hour at least.
Sure.
Lots of meaty things to dig into in this. But I agree with all of you guys. It's just not worth anymore to go to the trouble to hold back or to make up something that isn't true. Just speak your piece and speak it truthfully, and what comes, and that makes you stronger and more able to learn and grow more, in my opinion. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you, everybody who catches the replay, and certainly to everybody who shares the stream out on their social media. Looking forward to, what is it, part 7 next week, Sunday. We'll see you then. Everybody have a great week. God bless. Good night.